Ohayou gozaimasu. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you very much to Dean Inaba for introducing me. Today I will be giving you a mock lecture called Musicality Across Cultures, How Musical is Humanity. So before I start, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about Sils and Waseda, because this is, of course, open house, so you're all here. You came to Waseda to find out how it's like, what it's all about. And just wanted to say that I've been teaching here for 4 years now, and there are a lot of fantastic things about Sils. The biggest advantage for me, the thing that I like the most, is the diversity that I have of the students. And I can tell you in my classes, students are there from so many different regions of the world, so many cultural backgrounds, subcultural backgrounds, religious systems that they are part of. So this diversity is really, really wonderful. And in my classes, the best part is when I have a chance to discuss with my students so that we can all learn from each other. We can all learn based on these differences that there are. I mean, the fact that in the world we have so many different people, difference is a fact. Look at the diversity of languages, look at the diversity of musical traditions that there are in the world. And so that's a fact, but what do you do with that difference? On the one hand, difference could create boundaries, it could create conflict, which is unfortunately happening today in the world in so many places. But on the other hand, we can, based on those differences, we can create dialogue and we can learn from each other. So for me, in my classes, learning about music is actually learning about those differences, those cultural backgrounds, because music, apart from melody and rhythm, and pitch and so on, is about meaning. It's very meaningful to all of us, right? It carries so much data, and it makes us feel like we belong to all of these different ethnicities, these different identities. Therefore, as an ethnomusicologist, for me, what is really fascinating and what I teach in my classes is how music can be meaningful to us as humans from different cultures. So today I will tell you a little bit about that. And I just want to, it's not working. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. This is the field that I have received my PhD in, that I work in. It's called ethnomusicology. And if you take the word apart, you have ethnomusicology, which means the study of ethnic music or traditional music. However, this was back then. This was sometime maybe 100 years ago, 80 years ago, when the field was developing. And today, ethnomusicologists study all music. It's not limited to traditional music. It could be pop music. It could be hip hop. It could be also traditional. It's even music made by animals. Of course, we know that animals are also very musical beings. Even music made by supernatural beings. It's really, really unlimited. The field is very, very vast. And the main emphasis, the main focus in this field is precisely learning how music is meaningful. What does it mean for us as a humanity? Why do we have music everywhere? So in my case, I have traveled to a place called Azerbaijan. Has anyone ever been to Azerbaijan? Please raise your hand. Okay. This is a country which is located next to Turkey and next to Iran, and also on the north there's Russia. So it's a post-Soviet republic. As an ethnomusicologist, it's not about going to the archives or reading books in a library. It's actually about going to this region and taking interviews and talking to people and learning music, because what I want to know is, how do these people connect? What does it mean for them? How is music part of the political context? How is it part of the social context or religion? And you can see here my photos from my field work, where I spend my time. Actually, today I'm going. I'm flying to Azerbaijan again. I go quite frequently for research. And what I do is I take lessons, I perform, I hang out with musicians, and I take interviews, and I learn about what this music means. The way that it is performed is, this is a standard way. So you see these ethnic instruments. This is ethnic music called mugham. And there is in the middle, you see an instrument called tar, T-A-R. So tar actually means string. It's a very, if you think of guitar or setar, some other instruments in the world, tar means string. So this is, of course, a string instrument, and that's the instrument I have learned in Azerbaijan. And then we have a singer and then another instrumentalist. Basically, what I do is I learn how to perform, I talk to musicians, and I write about this music. So let's begin now with our topic of musicality. Could you please raise your hand if you like music? Okay, so almost everyone. And please raise your hand if you think you are musical. Very, very few of you. You don't have to be so shy, but actually, according to ethnomusicologists, all of you should raise your hands now with the question, are you musical? And that is because based on data from all around the world, just like language, the same way that we all speak a language, this is also in it's hardwired into our brains. We learn, we are all musical. If you like music, that means you can engage with music, it's meaningful to you, you can relate to music, that already makes you a musical being. So you don't have to be a composer, you don't have to be a performer, but if you can if you relate to music, if it's meaningful, if you emotionally react to music, you could be a great listener of music, and that is also being musical. So I'm going to talk about this today, and I will tell you about different 3 places in the world where musicality, this idea of musicality, differs, and that's what we're going to see. So the questions that we're going to ask: is musicality innate in our species? Is it something that we are all from birth are able to be musical? Or do we acquire musicality through socialization and inculturation? How does our society and culture tell us what this musicality is, and how does it teach us to be musical? Are only a chosen few musical? And what do ideas about musicality tell us about society? How you think about music, musicality. This is ultimately shaped by your culture and your upbringing, your inculturation. So those ideas, we can also use them to look at society at large. That's what we will focus on. Here is John Blocking. He was very, very famous ethnomusicologist, also anthropologist. He was a visionary. He was just a brilliant, brilliant scholar. And he wrote a book from 1973, How Musical is Man, or How Musical is Humanity, where he asked this question: how musical are we in totality as a human species? How musical is humanity? So he believed that all humans, not just those we call musicians, are musical to a degree, and that musicality defines what it means to be human. As I said, it's like language. We are all born as musical beings. So he indeed believed that musicality is innate. He also wrote that music and dance predate the invention of language. They are even more sort of natural because they're more bodily experiences. they even predate the invention of language. So all of us as humans were meant to be dancing and were meant to be making music from birth. John Blocking in the field of ethnomusicology was extremely important because he defended what is known as cultural relativism. This is extremely important. I would say today it is even more important in our world today. And what it means is that we judge a culture, we judge a music or any tradition as a person from that culture. We do not try to impose our own understandings, our own value systems on other cultures, on other musics, but we try to understand it as an insider. So that's a very profound idea that he came up with. And by saying this, he rejected comparison of music in the world. For example, if you are a scholar, let's say, from Europe somewhere, and or a composer, a musician, and we know that Western classical music is based on harmony, right? The harmony and melody are very, very important. However, if we look at Africa, people in Africa, their music is all about rhythm. It's about very complex rhythm. So quite interlocking, like rhythms happening simultaneously. It's very, very complex in that sense. So someone coming from Europe, part of Western classical tradition, cannot use harmony and melody as the basis to judge African music because it's just different. You know, this is music based on rhythm. So therefore, comparison in a way becomes kind of meaningless. You have to study music in its own context as an insider. So this is very, very huge change, very big shift in ethnomusicology, where now scholars are focusing on insiders' perspectives on particular cultures. And this is a shift away from ethnocentrism. Okay, so ethnocentrism, does anyone know what that means? Just want to ask, maybe we can have a microphone and someone can define it for us. What is ethnocentrism? It's the opposite of cultural relativism. Anyone? Just a guess? You don't have to give us a long explanation or definition. Just if you have any ideas or guesses, general understanding of it. Yes. Oh.
That is an idea that a certain ethnicity is basically superior to others compared in certain types. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yes, you're exactly on the right track. So we are, for by ethnocentrism, it means that we take one ethnicity, one particular tradition, let's say, like a musical tradition, and use that to judge all the rest, using that kind of as a measuring stick. So ethnocentrism is the thing we have to avoid, especially in fields like ethnomusicology. I think as human beings, actually, we have to avoid that. It's not good. But in ethnomusicology, this was a very important change with John Blocking. I will now go into the particular regions in the world and the ideas about musicality that we see there. John Blocking himself went to this region you see in Africa, which is near South Africa, people called Venda. This is the Venda people. You see a photograph of them with a ritual that they're doing, and you see highlighted in green the region where they live. I'm gonna show you here a video coming from the Venda people, and you can note what is happening here with the music. How are they using music? How are they participating in music? Let's see.
When we're healing the people, we use the medicine, and the medicine is from the tree. I am Norbora Mbiribiri, a son of Norbora and Waveri. I'm healing people different disease. I'm specialist for a different disease. I'm pure Venda. Now, we request the God to give us the rain, because we are now busy for digging, we prepare to planting the food like melon, then even the pumping for it.
What you saw there, it was a ritual. Obviously, it was a ritual. It had religious meanings behind it. And that is what happens among the Venda. Music is never separate. You know, like we have, for example, in more modernized societies, we go to a concert, we just look at music, we just watch just music just by itself. Here, on the other hand, music is part of very complex cultural, social rituals. So it's not separate. The other thing you might notice is that everyone is participating everyone is collectively making music. You don't have a performer versus a composer versus a listener who is just sitting there and just listening. Actually, everyone is participating. So those are very crucial differences. And John Blacking, when he did this research in South Africa, it raised a lot of questions for him about musicality. What he noticed is that if every Venda person seems to be musical, they are all making music, they're all part of the musical setting, then why in so-called developed societies are general musical abilities restricted to a chosen few? So if among the Venda, if everyone learns music, everyone learns how to sing, how to dance, how to make gestures, just as they learn language, just as they learn subsistence skills, everyone learns this. Then what does that say about modern societies? And in modern societies, what we have are economic stratification. We have complex economic structures. We have specialization, we have professionalism. So in modern societies, what we call musical are people who are strictly by profession, usually musicians. They could be teachers, they could be composers, they could be performers. So what it does is it creates professionalization and specialization of musicians. And correspondingly, the majority of the people, the rest of the people are demusicalized. We don't tend to see them as musical as those specialists in music. So that's all related to the economical structure and to our beliefs about music. Now let's go to the modernized societies. I here would refer to the Western world. And I have here, this is Horowitz, very, very famous pianist, performer. I'm gonna show you now what you see in a typical performance. And Horowitz is performing over here, very, very famous piece by Schumann. So if you compare this musical activity to the Venda, let's see the differences. And we have a very strikingly different imagination and idea about musicality here. What you see is there is a performer on the stage. There are listeners. And I'm sure you have been to this kind of concert. You know, I myself, when I go to these kinds of concerts, I am so afraid of even, you know, sometimes like making some sound with my bag or something, or coughing, you know, hold my cough or something, because you don't want to interrupt. And there is this kind of separation of the audience members versus the performers, where you have to really restrain yourself as a listener, and everything, all the focus is on the performer. So there's no sort of participation from the audience. A very, very different dynamic and very, very different idea of musicality that we have in these kinds of societies. Another example from the Western world is a test. It's called a seashore test. It is from, you can kind of see what it looks like. It's a test of musical ability. And this is a test done in high school, usually, for students. It's from 1914, but still today some schools still use it. So what do? Is they kind of measure the way you can detect melody or pitch or intervals or things like that. And actually, for ethnomusicologists, this is a ridiculous test, because musicality, as I said, it is so much more than recognizing an interval. If you take this test to a Venda person in Africa, they will be considered as extremely unmusical. Why? Because for them, they have a harmonic understanding of music. So if you know about intervals, perfect fourth interval is the same as perfect fifth for them. It's an inversion. And they would see that as the same interval. So this test would determine them to be as extremely unmusical. So it's really, really, really biased, basically. And it's useless. The way that it defines musicality. Now, how can we analyze musicality? So take any culture, even the cultures you are from, or any musical tradition. How can you understand how music is defined and what musicality means for people in this tradition? You can look at how music is learned and how music is taught. So this is what we call musical transmission. This is learning and teaching music, passing on of musical knowledge and skill from person to person, from generation to generation. And what happens when we learn music is we learn this learned behavior. We learn ideas about music, what music means. So although something in our brain, music is part of our brains, it's hardwired into our brains. We could be innately musical from birth. All of us could be very musical when we grow up. However, in our cultures, in our societies, we learn how to understand this musicality, and it might be very limiting actually in some cultures. So this becomes part of learned behavior or enculturation. Our culture, our society tells us what is musicality, how musical you can be, how musical you cannot be. Cultures and societies tell us those things. So how do we learn musicality? Well, if we look at the modernized Western societies or Western classical music, we know that music is learned with notation. You all know that, right? It's a written score. And I myself learned piano in the conservatory in Canada. I've been through this. So basically, you're just stuck, you're inseparable from notation. You have to be very accurate with what you see on paper. So written notation, this is written transmission, is the main methodology. There is musical literacy in Western modernized, Western classical tradition. And that means that it's the score, if you look at it, there are so many symbols. You know, what does it mean? Piano forte, the 3/4, all of these melody, the notes. It's very, very much about sort of the specialized knowledge and kind of like analysis and theory of music. That's the number one priority. Specialization, professionalism. In these traditions, there's an idea that you can become a music professional, a specialist in music. Very individualistic approach. You usually have lessons one-on-one. And in performance context, there is this separation between audience and performer. So all of those are very important factors. Here I have Western notation. You see very sophisticated, all of these symbols, very much when you learn, when you play, you have to just be obsessed with, how to reproduce it accurately, how to be so accurate to all of these symbols. If we look elsewhere in the world, we don't see this. People learn music in a much more bodily way. They don't, in many places, there's no score. People are engaged bodily, they are engaged with their imagination. In a lot of places in the world, improvisation is important. It's not about reproducing the score, what's on the score, but you have to improvise every time you're performing. So very, very different ideas about musicality. The last case study I want to show you is Bali in Indonesia. Okay, has anyone been to Indonesia? Yes, I see a few hands up. So those of you who have been there, I am sure that when you visited, you were probably mesmerized by the music and by the drama. This is an extremely, a culture with such rich musical traditions and drama and art. So I have here on the map, you see Indonesia and we see Bali over there as well. This is a very touristic, of course, very hot touristic destination. And I'm going to play for you the music. How does it sound like, the music coming from Bali? Let's listen to it. The style is called kebyar. You see at the bottom there, this is from Bali, specifically Bali in Indonesia. It's called kebyar. It means to burst forth. You can hear that in the music. It's very, very loud. It's very, very fast. And what you heard is an ensemble called gamelan. So in Indonesia, this is what you call musical ensembles. They're called gamelan. They all have their own specific instruments, instrumentations. And in Bali, the performance of the gamelan is linked to ritual as well, just like what we saw in Africa among the Venda people. Balinese, Indonesian people believe that traditionally that there's harmony in the cosmos, in the universe. And if people get sick, or something goes wrong with the crops or the weather, something goes wrong, that means that there is a disbalance between the good and the evil. And they create a ritual and they perform gamelan to restore that harmony, to please the evil spirits. So it's a very ritual, kind of ritual performances that we get. Here is a photo of the instruments themselves. You can see there are metallophones. It's a metal made from metal. And I'll show you a video where you can see how it is played. Actually, very difficult to play, very hard. I tried learning this when I was doing my bachelor's at the University of Toronto. There was a gamelan in the university. And I remember, what you do is you have to hit one of these metal slabs, and then you have to dump it with the other hand right away before you hit another one. And you can hear how fast they play. So can you imagine how fast you have to do that? It's really, really difficult. This is one kind of Semar Pegulingan. They have many, many different gamelans with all of their titles, different instruments. So how does it look like? I also have a video for you we can see. It's quite amazing what they're doing. And actually, this is a recording that was made as a video recording to be placed on YouTube and so on, to be circulated and promoted. But if you actually go and you see an actual ritual performance, it's a little bit different, because there's going to be people from the village, all around, and they will also come to the performers. They will perform with them. If there's a dramatic kind of story that is part of it, they will act it out together. So it's very, very collective music making that happens with gamelan. If you think about this music, you try to analyze it, very fast, they're interlocking rhythms, it's very cyclical. There's a gong that sounds at the end of every cycle. They say that this is part of a reflection of Hinduism. In Bali, Hinduism is very prominent. And Hinduism, the belief in reincarnation, the life cycles, actually is reflected in this music, the cyclical nature of the music. But that's what it sounds like. You can hear that. So what do they think about musicality? How is this music learned? That's our final few slides to think about. Well, art, music, dance, and drama are extremely highly valued in Bali. They are there every day in all of the villages. They're always making music. And everyone is encouraged and expected to participate in these rituals. Everyone is part of these rituals. Children, for example, from a very young age, they could be invited to actually participate in the performance. They treat it as a kind of play, and they would invite them to perform with the musicians from very, very young age. It's learned without notation. There is no written score in Bali. They use gestures to learn the music. It's very bodily kind of learning of the music, very communal, very social approach to how music is learned and to how it is performed in these family, village, community kind of like contexts. Moreover, music in Bali, it is a social obligation. You have to make music. It's like, because there's a ritual, you have to, it's, as I said, part of this cosmology, contacting the evil spirits and restoring harmony in the universe and so on. It's a moral obligation, actually. Every single village ward will have this orchestra, and they're huge orchestras. And every household must contribute at least one member to perform in a gamelan every day. So this is very much, very, very collective, very, very communal. And one ethnomusicologist, Anderson Sutton, he studied Bali. He went there, he lived there, and he studied. And I'm just going to quote him here. I have a quote by him. He writes that while the Balinese demonstrate abilities that often strike others as spectacular, they maintain that such activities are a normal part of life. The exquisite masked dancer by night may well be a rice farmer by day, and the player of lightning-fast interlocking musical passages accompanying him may manage a mole-eating stall. So although they are musicians, they perform in the gamelan, this is not their professionalization, this is not their specialization, because everyone participates in music in this way. I'll show you one more video. This is a dance, more you will see the dramatic aspect here, called Baris dance, and it's kind of like a warrior dance of manhood in Bali. So of course, behind there, you see the gamelan orchestra accompanying the dancer. Now, to conclude, the question, how musical is humanity? And you've just seen three different parts of the world, three different traditions today, and you can see how different people understand music, how different they participate in music, how differently they understand musicality ultimately. So taking Bali as an example, if there is the cultural belief, as they have here, that all human beings are musical, if there is a social expectation of musicality, if there's a social obligation to participate, if people from a young age are encouraged and included in music making activities, then they amply demonstrate that musicality. Answers: musicality is innate. We can see from the variety of what happens in the world that actually we are all musical, as I said, just like language, just like learning to speak. But we learn to perform that musicality through socialization and enculturation. In every culture, in every society, we have specific ideas about what music is, what musicality is, and that impacts, it could limit perhaps us. We define and judge musicality in terms relative to that culture. So in ethnomusicology, it's very important to consider insider perspective, cultural relativism. We study contexts in ethnomusicology and we avoid ethnocentrism. We avoid judging music, ideas about musicality as an outsider, but try to see it as an insider. By musicality, this is my last slide here. I leave you with this. This is a term in ethnomusicology. If you know the term bilingual, you probably have heard this term. Bilingual means that you acquire a second language. You can speak a second language. And bimusicality is a term in ethnomusicology about you learning how to perform other kind of musical tradition. So for me, if I went to Azerbaijan, I learned how to perform Azerbaijani music. I became bi-musical in that sense. And if musicality is defined culturally, can we agree that our musical potential is limited by our sociocultural context and upbringing? If we can be bilingual, can we also be bi-musical? And lastly, finally, what is the human capacity for music making? So based on all of these examples, you can answer this question for yourself. Thank you so much for listening. I'm very happy that you all came here, and take care. Thank you very much. Thank you.